Well, is it? You got anywhere else to go?
This is your show. You were about to throw it at me, weren't you?
I got something. All right, I got something. The Yokozuna documentary. What a great job. People have asked about that, and I got a chance to see that this week, and what a great job they did on that. I really enjoyed it. That's when they're doing wrestling history, they have to rewrite it because Vince is paying for all this, and Vince wants it told the way he wants it told, rather than the way it happened. That is not a bad reflection on the technical people at the studio, the editors and the producers and the video people and the technicians that put these things together and shoot them. They're first class. They look like network TV quality productions whenever they do something like this. You know, it's just, I guess it's like a talented person working at Fox News where, you know, you can do a real good job, but you just can't tell the truth, to work for Vince and have him revising history. But in this case, because they didn't need to revise any of Yoko's history, they could just tell the story. It's not like his particular story contradicted anything that they've told before, and that it didn't really happen that way. So I enjoyed it more than a lot of their broader historical pieces, because you didn't pick out errors and you know, problems and or phony interpretations of things. What did you think?
I thought it was good. Obviously, with everything WWE does, there's a historically inaccurate slant at times.
Well, I just covered that. What was historically inaccurate about this?
It's baked in the cake with everything they do.
What was inaccurate here?
Well, Bruce Pritchard's a little full of shit in general.
Well, I mean, they just have him sit down and say things that will expand the story. But now, by the way, that is not a put on. That kind of condescending, I know more than you do, fucking tone he uses that really also.
He was the worst part of the documentary because he was the only person they used to speak for The Office.
But that's because he's there. Yeah. But at least he didn't have to lie. There was no untruths. There's a few clarifications we can go into here in a minute. But I enjoyed it. I didn't think they had to play with history too much for this. I loved the family stuff, especially with Fatu, Rikishi, and Lloyd Anoa'i, that was, and several. I've known and met and worked with several of the families, so they were, and the family pictures and just the reflection there. That was kind of enjoyable. Do you have any problem with that?
I thought the family was the best part.
Okay.
And I thought it really painted a great picture of who he was and how he ended up with Afa and Sika. They're great. I mean, the family was what made the documentary great, I thought.
You know, it just illustrates that the Samoan family, and I mean, it's a big family, but they've always been so athletically gifted for the wrestling business. And I mean, as the generations have gone, because I think everybody will admit that Afa and Sika were fearsome and were badass, but they weren't flying around maybe as athletically as some of their offspring or the next generations or whatever, but they've always been athletic in the wrestling way. And I mean, we've said a million times, looking at Jacob Fatu right now, he's amazing. But they've always been able to move, and they've always been able to move despite their size, because they're all predisposed to get larger as they get older. You can see that too. I'm not breaking new ground here. But with Yoko, that was the sad thing. It was almost like a drug problem with him. It was maybe more dangerous. He would have lived longer if he'd had a drug problem, then lived to be older than that. And they were even, the family crying about it, say he couldn't control it. And the thing with Duke, I've told this story before, but poor Yoko, they had him try to do the program first, and obviously it didn't work because he didn't do it. But then when they actually sent him to Duke, and Bruce touched on this, he said he got bigger, which was no lie. When he first went to Duke and was staying there, since I was in talent relations, they had me call him once a week to see how his progress was to report back to Vince. So I got the number. So, okay, and I called him the first week. Yoko, hey, brother, how are you doing? What's going on? What's the status? Oh, brother, I feel so good. And he said, they're getting a lot of fluid off of me. Because people that size, what I'm about to say is not ridiculous. If a human male weighs, or a human being, I guess, of any kind, weighs upwards of 600 pounds, you can hospitalize them, catheterize them, put them on a heavy-duty diuretic, and you can drain 80 or 100 pounds off of them in the course of a week or so. This is not, you know that, right? You can vouch for this, or do you know that?
No, I've heard that before.
Okay. So he said, yeah, brother, he said, a lot of fluid, I've lost 100 pounds. Okay, great. Then I called the next week, and it was the same time. Hey, brother, it's great. Yeah, boom, 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 boom. I'm down 75 pounds. I'm like, what? And Yoko's such a nice guy. I'm not going to be the one. I'm calling to see how he's doing because they said that Vince wanted to know, but I'm not going to browbeat this guy, right? Okay, so I reported back. He says he's down 75 pounds. Thought it was 100 last week. I think that's what he said. Well, there's fluctuation because of the fluid, right? Next week, he was down 50 pounds. And it was true, but by the time that he left the Duke Weight Loss Clinic, he was heavier than when he went in because he had found somebody that to fucking pay to bring him buckets of chicken and shit. So that was, but at the same time, he had such a great personality. It was hard to get mad at him, right? And some people had asked me about those, especially when he got heavier. It was dangerous to himself, but as they mentioned on the show, it was dangerous to other people too. But now the bonsai splash, when he turned babyface on me, and we didn't turn heel, we already were, but he turned babyface against me and Owen and Bulldog, whatever. One time they called for him to give me the bonsai, and I obviously was at ringside with the job guys when he would do the squash matches, and I'd seen him with the top guys, and I went up before I said, just, Yoko, remember, brother, I've always loved you. He said, don't worry, brother, I take care of you. And I swear to God, this was when he was at 700. I'm laying there. He's drugged me over under the corner, and I'm laying there, and he gets up on the second rope. And they use real ropes. We've mentioned many times in the WWF rings, which I hated. So they were so springy and hard to get your balance on, and they're bowing down, and I'm looking up, and he's so big around. And he goes up, and he bonsai, and he comes down. I have been hit harder with pillows. And that's what it felt. It felt like soft pillows landing on my chest. There was no impact whatsoever. If he wanted to take care, and it still looked great, saw the tape back. If he wanted to take care of you, he would. But when he was in the ring with the job guys, when he was first getting over in that first run and he was going to be the champion, he was flattening those guys because it was going to look good, because it was his money and his family's money. And he apologized afterwards on a few occasions. But that was what was expected. But if he took care of you, he was amazing. And it wasn't until he just got so fucking big that he was doing those matches with The Undertaker in 93. He was 500 pounds and taking those big flat back bumps and flying through the ropes and doing all that shit. I had an argument on Twitter with somebody who said, well, because I'd mentioned somebody sent out a tape of D'Lo Brown when he was working with Shane Hurricane Helms, when D'Lo was like 240 in the early 2000s, and he'd bumping like a cruiserweight. And I said, well, this kid showed up at his first Smoky Mountain TV taping. He was a 340-pound kid that got the basics, but after a lot of hard work, look what he was able to accomplish. And some wise ass, so you mean to tell me he weighs 340 pounds? Nobody'd believe that. I said, no, go back and read the fucking tweet, moron. He did weigh, well, I don't know, they exaggerate all the size and red. Well, Yokozuna would have had to have been 600 pounds or whatever. Guess what, Buttercup? Because I was in on the official weigh-ins also. Yoko was in the high fours in early 93 when he started in the WWF. For most of the run as champion, he was around 500, but he started getting bigger. By the time that he came back in 95 after he'd tried that program where he tried to lose weight at home, he was already well into the sixes. And the reason why that he could not, finally, why they let him go, you remember Survivor Series 96, Rocky's debut, Rocky Maivia, on pay-per-view was the same as Yoko's last pay-per-view. It was at Madison Square Garden. He was in an 8-man tag Survivor Series match, did 2 or 3 moves at best, left the ring, walked down the short aisle at Madison Square Garden, because then they used the short side, right? You know what I'm talking about. You've been there. But you didn't walk out the long entranceway back in those days in the Garden. It was like a 50-foot aisleway. You came out from the side and went back same way. And he had to sit down at Gorilla to fucking catch his breath from that. And at that point, because New York State's the most strictest commission in the world, or in the country at least, they demanded that he pass a New York State Athletic Commission physical, which he could not. And his weight had topped out. It right at over 800, whether it was 802, 803, 804. It wasn't 810. I remember that, but it was an 80 something. And he couldn't pass physical and they wouldn't license him. And if he couldn't get licensed in New York, then they wouldn't license him in any state that had a commission. So he was effectively unusable in 20 something states at that point. And they had to let him go. But until he got even that big, he still wasn't dangerous and he still could control everything he was doing. And I've told a story also before, right before, a couple months before that, summertime, I think it was, we were in Indianapolis and he had turned on my guys, right? And they got me in the ring and he gave me a leg drop. And he'd done that you saw in the documentary, 1,000,000 times he's flying through the air with that big leg drop, looked like it killed you. Well, in this case, because I'm laying there and I'm pretty comfortable with Yoko at this point. And all I did was turn my head to the left because he was coming from my right side and wait for the leg drop. Boom, when it landed, my neck cracked in very quick succession about 4 or 5 different times. Crack, 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 crack. Because it turned it all the way around. And I was like, God damn. And in the locker room afterwards, he said, brother, I'm sorry. I got to step off. Yeah, he got to step off because he was so big. I hate to say this, and I've loved the guy. His legs, his thighs were bumping into each other when he would try to walk now across the ring. And it messed up his balance. And he sat on my fucking head. To this day, that was in 1996. To this day, I can turn my head to the left twice as far as I can turn it to the right, which sometimes hampers me when I'm trying to back up driving. But he was amazing. And I mean, you could see that footage, especially when he was younger, when he was training, when he was on. To move like that at 500 and 600 pounds meant that he was one of the, not for weightlifting strength, but just for pushing and pulling strength, one of the strongest men in the world. And also, probably, if he had been able to get it under control and drop weight, can you imagine the cardio system that he would have had?
What would have happened if, when he went to the Duke weight loss program, it had all worked out, but maybe overly worked out? If he had called you, or you had called him up and he said, I'm down 350 pounds. I mean, how could you be Yokozuna at that point? I mean, what would have happened if it had really worked out and he had dropped just a ton of weight?
It would have taken quite a while to drop 350 pounds. And I hesitate to say that would have happened in less than 2 or 3 years, unless you do a weight loss surgery, which it would have ended his wrestling career probably, because how can you take bumps with, whatever. But anyway, nevertheless, that's one thing I've never heard of anybody in the wrestling business while they're wrestling is the stomach reduction surgery. But he started in the business, he wasn't 400 pounds. Coquina Maximus, think about that. I mean, there would probably, if Yokozuna at 700 pounds had lost 350 pounds, there would have had to have been some extensive, let's say, cosmetic surgery take place. And maybe a change in the wrestling outfit to cover up some things. But you've still got a 350-pound man what could he have done at 350 pounds if he could move like that at 700? Would he have been doing the Jacob Fatu springboard moonsault? I mean, remember till Rikishi got to be the high threes or whatever. Remember the Samoan SWAT team, him and Samu, that was on the show also. They did flying headbutts off the top rope, flying splashes from the top to the floor at 300 and something pounds. You would have had to change the Yokozuna gimmick, but you would have had a 30-year-old, 350-pound guy that, was still an amazing athlete. I think something could have been done. It would have been better than him dying. But I never got any of the same thought from him or from anybody that in the family that would talk about it, that it was like Andre didn't want to have the surgery probably also because it was newer and, less, what's the word I'm searching for? It would make you nervous back then. It was a newer thing back then, but also he thought, will I lose what makes me special? Blah, blah, blah. With Yoko, it was he just had an addiction. I watched him with literally buckets of chicken. We've told the story that at promos, this was after lunch in catering and before dinner afterwards, he'd go through a family bucket of chicken that he'd get Brawler or Bruno or somebody, downtown Bruno, not San Martino, to bring him while we're sitting there doing pre-tapes in the afternoon. So, I think it was uncontrollable. There had to be something going on. And they even said Savio brought up he had the sleep apnea bad. He would be sitting there and start nodding off. When in a space of time between 1990 and 1996, somebody gains 400 pounds, there's something else going on.
What about that story Savio told where Yokozuna stood up for him when guys were ripping him in the locker room? Do you remember that?
Not specifically, because I probably just wasn't there, but I believe it. Because Savio was, Savio was kind of like an honorary, member of the Island Boys at that point. And Savio was with the group of cooler guys. Yoko was with Taker, the Godwins, Mark Canterbury, and old Phineas Godwin. Fucking goddamn, I forgot what Phineas's real name is now. But they were the anti-clique. They were the cool guys clique. So they were all a part of their group. And Yoko would do that. And he really did. When one member of the family had a good paying job, all of them prospered because they were all even though it was such a huge family. The stories of Yoko, hey, here's some money to the young kids or whatever, doing this for me or doing for that for me or whatever, or anything you need, brother. It was not limited to him. They would all do that. They're a very close family, even though there's so many of them and they're spread out all over the place. But, that's it. Just nobody could get him to take better care of himself. And that I remember we were on the road when the toilet story happened. And I had to think, that's so fucking embarrassing. And that was part of Fuji's deal because Fuji, there's some Japanese heritage to that. He had to do a lot of things for Yoko that you wouldn't normally do if you were just a wrestler's manager because of Yoko's size and, Fuji having to take up some of the slack.
What did you think of the way you were used in the documentary and the way you were addressed in the documentary?
I made a cameo. I guess they couldn't cut me out of the fucking Regis and Kathy Lee stuff. But I didn't care that there wasn't more of me because it wasn't really about me. It was about Yoko. I thought they could have done a better job explaining why Mr. Fuji was his manager, but I was his spokesperson. But that might confuse people that didn't understand why I popped up and what was going on there. But that's minor in the course of the overall storytelling.
So you like the documentary overall?
There's no goddamn, they don't have to pay royalties, so it's not like they tried to fucking get past it on that. The World's Greatest Managers DVD with me and Paul Bearer and Bobby Heenan and Sherry Martel and Heyman and all those people on the cover, they tried not to pay me royalties. Because if you go back, almost every single bit of footage used of me in that whole thing is from WCW that they didn't have to pay royalties on. But at the same time, me and Heenan had more time on the DVD than any of the other managers. So I called him. What the fuck? I haven't got anything on my royalty checks for this. Oh, he tried to give me some who shot John. I said, look, I'm just asking a question, and you can call me back when you've got an answer, or you can try to fucking jack me around, because I don't give a fuck to sue anybody named McMahon, and I'll cause all kinds of fucking, this was 10 years ago or more. I'll cause all kinds of shit. I don't give a fuck.
Who are you saying this to?
What was his name? Frank Serpe. He used to be the chief financial officer. I think it was whoever the CFO was at the time, whose fucking stamp was on the goddamn checks. So I want to know why I didn't get this. So he called me back. At first he had said, well, I said, I'm the longest segment. I said, my match with Paul Lee from the Bash is on here as a bonus, and I'm on the cover, and I haven't got a royalty. Oh, well, we don't have to pay. We have your ownership of your likeness for the cover photos. I said, I know all of this. I worked in the office that you work in. I want to know why I didn't get royalties for being on this DVD. Well, we don't pay royalties. That's when I found out about the WCW stuff. For WCW foot, I said I was fucking the manager of your heavyweight and tag team champions. I'd like to know why I'm not getting royalties. And I said, if you can either calmly register my question and find out and get back with me, or we can be adversarial from the start, and I'll cuss you up one side and down the other, and then I'll just sue Vince McMahon and tell him that you're the reason why I did it, because you were an asshole to me. As it asked Vince, go call Vince right now in his office and ask, will Jim Cornette cause trouble if you piss him off? See what his answer is. So they called me back and said, oh, we made a mistake. What happened, if you go back and watch this DVD, every single bit of that footage is me from something in Crockett or TBS, except there is like a 10-second clip that's in slow motion, like a transition clip of me walking to the ring with Yokozuna. And because that was in there and that was WWF footage, they had to pay me the fucking royalties. Fucking assholes. But anyway, you know, if you have people giving you, whether it be a headache or a pain in the ass or a pain anywhere, there's one surefire way to fucking give yourself some relief. And folks, that's with the products from the folks at Omax, including CryoFreeze. If you're sitting at home in this cold weather, it's cold, it'll make your knees freeze and your liver quiver and your spleen turn green. And if you're suffering from aches and pains, whether it be arthritis, backaches, muscle soreness, joint pain. Usually if you have a joint, you don't have that much pain. But if you got pain in your joints, if you want to try a drug-free solution, you need to try the product that we've been talking about. Omax CryoFreeze CBD Pain Relief Roll-On. It's an all-natural topical pain reliever that ices out the pain with a 1-2 punch of super cold menthol and hemp CBD. Rub it. Roll it even, because it's a roll-on. It's got a ball at the end. Have you ever had a ball rolled on you? Roll a ball of CryoFreeze onto your back, neck, hands, or any painful area. I would not take it internally or shove it up your keister. But otherwise than that, roll it on to help block the pain, reduce inflammation, improve muscle and joint flexibility. We love this stuff. We take baths in it daily here at the castle, and you can too. It contains 10 powerful ingredients that provide a powerhouse dose of relief, which can last up to 8 hours. It's not greasy. It doesn't stink bad. It gives you a nice menthol, clears out your sinuses too. Anyway, if you go to Omax, that's OMAX Health.com, and enter the code JCE, OmaxHealth.com, enter the code JCE, you'll get 20% off the Omax CryoFreeze and everything site-wide, whether it's that great sport cream they've got or the CBD daily supplement tablets or capsules or whatever the case they are. All the stuff that they've got will keep you from hurting and also numb the pain, reduce the inflammation. As Dusty Rhodes said one time, I can tell you about pain, baby. Well, I can tell you about pain too. And it's shits. It's the shits. Pain is the shits. Pain is bad. Omax is good. OmaxHealth.com, the code JCE, 20% off. Everything site-wide. What more can I do for the cult of Cornette?